going back to the question, was there a time and that happened, and has it happened to us? Probably yes, but have you seen it happening to your team?
Yeah, absolutely. So first, I'm Prashant. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at Sonetel. It's a Swedish company with a communication platform where we have customers in like 170 countries, and we basically operate this completely out of India. So it's a very interesting mix we have. The company is Swedish, investors board Swedish, the ops Indian, product development, network operations, customer service. So that's the setup we have today. And to answer your question specifically about a personal experience, so something very interesting related to the silence. You spoke about yes, how it's interpreted, but also how silence is interpreted. When we started ops, like in 2010, we had a small team, and we basically wanted to have these transparent monthly meetings, which are basically all hands, in terminology from a US perspective. And I have worked primarily in startups. I've worked in the US in startups. I've worked in India in startups, and a very interesting difference that I saw is that every monthly meeting had massive amount of information given out. This was coming from a Nordic Scandinavian perspective, but there was absolutely no reaction. And there were meetings after meetings. Every month you have them, but there's like zero response. There's nobody asking any questions, despite the fact that you have cash position, you have financials of the company spoken out, very clearly and evidently. And if I cut back to when I was in the US, I stood in all hands meetings with about 20, 25 people there. And the moment the CEO stopped speaking, about 20 minutes in, there were questions about, do we have enough runway to survive December? Are we on the right track? Why have you taken this decision to suddenly deviate in this direction? So, and what we realized, like long back here with the Swedish setup, was that silence was basically an indicator not of acceptance, but it's basically just, yeah, exactly. So it could mean anything. And that cue was taken, and from the next year, we actually started doing sessions right after the monthly meetings to actually look at what was absorbed, what was the reaction from the team, what questions do people have that needs to be kind of moved across. So I think this is something that I've kind of personally seen in different setups that I've been through.
Perfect. So in my experience across 20 years, 21 years now, so Prakash Dwivedi, I work with EY right now, work back with a lot of financial services, GCC. So we deal with a lot of clients that are sitting in head offices in Australia, UK, US. Most of these meetings, the recurring ones, like Prashant mentioned, if you have a structure defined, the rules defined for those meetings, life becomes very easy for everyone around. I think assumption kicks in when everybody has got a different perception of whatever is being talked about by the different set of people. So having a structure defined at the beginning of such meetings really sets the tone very well, where you know what the output is going to be, what is everybody having a conversation on, what do you have to agree, if you disagree, how do you normalize disagreements, for example, right? That's typically always a sticky point, even when client calls are there or internal calls are there. Disagreement in India is very different from disagreement in other geographies. For example, a guy lower to you can just say, no, I don't agree, and it's normalized. Some places it's very different, right? So having the knowledge of those limitations in terms of conversations is very important if you need that meeting to come out with an outcome at the end of the day. So I think structure is the most important thing as per me for a lot of these meetings.
Nidhi, engineering teams, are you seeing a similar pattern in engineering
Very
teams
similar.
as well?
I think I can resonate with each and everyone here. We, like, for the teams like ours, who are kind of across the globe, across cultures, across background, in fact, pretty much, similar challenges and similar experiences, I would say. What we have started of late doing recently around this is, there is something called cultural quotient. So we have IQ, which is around the cognitive abilities, bringing up the cognitive abilities. We have EQ. Organizations are training on EQ, which is emotional side of, because we deal with people. There is another aspect of CQ, which is like cultural quotient. And I think I was having some research paper around CQ, like how to learn. It's about deliberately spending time with teams and cultures to understand, and deliberately training our teams about them. For instance, when we do this trust exercises, right? So trust also, when you're kind of training, it applies, like how are you building trust within the teams, right? That also differs with different regions and different zones. Like for instance, if you go to US, and I think I was talking about somebody interrupting, right? That in that culture in US, it's perfectly fine. It's like open culture and all. The moment you switch to some of the Asian cultures, right, which who are not very open in terms of of that. So some of these deliberate steps we are doing in the organization to train, teach the people around and ensure that they understand the culture and give, as I said, training your brain, train your mind to kind of understand what are the perspective and backgrounds of the team on the other side.
Yeah, hi, I'm Shantaprasad. Work for Dr. Reddy's and Nestlé joint venture, and a slightly different context than some of my colleagues here, but totally resonate with the semantics that are involved. I was since you asked me that, have you experienced this with your team? And I thought in the team context, typically you have a manager and your team. I'll give you a slightly different and interesting observation. So when this venture was happening, there were very different disparate groups trying to solve with the same intent. They wanted to make the venture happen, right? And there is this one Swiss, Swiss group, which is Swiss and French group, and then there's an Indian company, right? Uh, and both come to the table where there is one group, and I don't want to indicate which is which, but one group that comes that's very methodical, thought through when they're coming for the meetings. Even if this is for the first time, all the options evaluated, and once you've set something, then you'll do everything to make it happen. There's limited flexibility and room to change. And there's this other group who says that we want to solve the same problem, but maybe we don't. We'll come with flexibility. If we go and commit some options, we'll figure out a way to solve for it, right? Because that's their orientation. Uh, what was interesting here is ultimately this happened, and as I think things started moving, of course, there were times of embarrassment, there were times of frictions, there were times of saying that you sense in the room that they're not speaking, but the trust factor is taking a back seat sometimes. And with all of this, I think the reflection has been, so this is a slightly different dynamic, right? And doesn't happen most of the time. So unusual. So two or three reflections on this. One reflection is typically this cross-cultural thing gets, the context is either macro, which is countries, religions, value systems. It's also designed by organizations, American, European, Indian, or it could be also the tone that you set with the team. It's the team dynamic. So I think that's one thing one needs to, at least that's been, the awareness of this in terms of what context am I dealing with, and what's working here, what's not working here. And there could be a few enablers that could come in that we could kind of talk about. But yes, I think totally resonate.